Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, welcome to the second ever episode of the Diversity Minded podcast with myself, James Gale, and the lovely.
Melissa White.
And we're here today to discuss a topic that's quite near and dear to our hearts, and it's being mixed or biracial in the workplace and life in general, and what that means for kind of modern day business in diversity, equity, and inclusion in a very strange world for that to exist. And before that, we want to make sure we reintroduce ourselves every episode to make sure we give new viewers a chance to understand who we are, what we do, why we do this. So I'm going to hand over to Melissa first to kind of dive into her backdrop because it's a lot more interesting than mine, I can tell you that. So Melissa, take it away.
Thanks, James. Actually, no more interesting, just probably a bit longer. But I'm really passionate about this topic of diversity mindedness, mostly because as I look at EDI, DEI initiatives, a lot of what's missing is the mindset or having a look at the behavior and the way that people think and make decisions within organizations. And so I was using my personality profiling that I was doing with performance coaching and applying it to, well, how could we establish whether or not we're really getting true diversity within organizations in terms of how people show up, how they make decisions, how they solve problems, how they think and behave. So that's really why I'm super excited about today's topic, also because obviously I'm biracial, in case you
Mm.
didn't notice.
Yeah, I think people might have noticed that about the both of us. And what are those two identities? Who are you combined?
So every day, I would say, I get asked, where am I from? And I say New Zealand. And then they're like, but you don't sound like you're from New Zealand. And then I'm like, well, I'm also half Singaporean, but you sound American. And so I'm white New Zealander, which is actually, but the majority of that is British, and half Chinese Singaporean, but grew up all over the world, so have this accent. But I am not American. I can only legitimately live forever in New Zealand.
Mm. Makes sense. And there's a lot to that. And again, I think a lot of us have kind of fairly complicated stories. And the reason I said yours is more interesting is because I haven't come from many places. I'm Southampton, UK, born and bred. That's where I've been. But my dad is Jamaican and my mum is white British, and that's kind of my story. My identities combining there once form a Commonwealth. I'm not sure if Jamaica's still part of the Commonwealth. I feel like I should know that, but I don't. So yeah, and thinking about that, it's like you wouldn't think it comes into your day to day life, especially when it comes to work, but it absolutely does because most people spend their time guessing where I am or what I am. I've had everything from I get Egyptian a lot, which is quite fun. I get Indian or Pakistani, which makes sense because I love being racially ambiguous. It does make me laugh watching people guess, but that's just one of the small benefits, I guess. But yeah, in the workplace, people keep calm and carry on because that's definitely the British workplace and how we get into that. And in terms of how you see things and being accepted in the workplace, how have you had any experiences that have pushed you to what you do today?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I've had, yeah, lots of experiences. So when I learned about personality profiling, so aside from my cultural or racial different or dichotomy, or I don't know if that would be the
That's a
right
cool
word.
word, but I
Yeah.
like it. Sorry.
Uh, so if you were, it was actually when I understood my personality that was a game changer for me because in my career, I was always kind of an outlier. I never really fit into the typical corporate of where I was working. I was
Mm.
often the first to achieve things that hadn't been done before. And I realize now it was because of my super low compliance, which you also have, I know. But
Oh yeah.
we the biggest thing with the low compliance is and really struggling with process and lots of information and being really detailed and administrative based when you're naturally a bit more out of the box, kind of like people or well, if you're low C, then you're likely
Yeah.
to be something else. But anyway, we can get into that in a minute. But it would be that my understanding my own personality and why I was just so different from everyone around me.
Yeah, it's like, and for those who aren't familiar, because we're far too in this world and we forget often to redefine it.
Oh, yeah,
C,
sorry.
compliance, and C is the C in the DISC personality profile acronym. So then again, all the last episode is about that. So if you're interested, check it out in the link below. So
And we'll go further deeper into that too, I
big
think.
time. And at one point, we'll do an episode where we go through mine live and direct, so you can see in
Yeah.
the heart of my soul and expose all of it. But it's an interesting point you bring up about obviously the personality and mindset thing is just as important. And again, one of the reasons we start this podcast is because of how often the neurodiversity side of things and mindset and the kind of actual ethnicity or place you've come from and that side of diversity, they always are very separate and they're not combined together, because when we look at our experiences, we have experiences of not just looking different from everyone else usually, and that people try to figure out what we are, but then we're also feel completely different on the inside from a mindset point of view as well. And actually from the mindset point of view, that's where the productivity is and can be unlocked for those who are trying to forge ahead, or your management or employers trying to get them most out of your diverse teams. So that's again one of the reasons we're going to be talking about this, so we can dive more heavily into that topic, and then people can speak to you from a professional point of view if they need to book in consultancy from a higher point of view, which is what Melissa does best. But I know it's a charged question, but again, that story and experiences, what comes to mind first when you look at when mindset isn't considered in a workplace and what you've seen happen?
Well, I would have, especially when I was working in Singapore, and Singapore culturally, if, working with locals, there is a hierarchy. And if somebody's your boss, you don't challenge them. And yet I have this like little person in my mind that doesn't stop me from speaking and challenging. And it's why I was successful in challenging businesses on how they were doing things and why they should buy my services and products. But so and I literally had my manager say to me in our one-on-one, Melissa, I know you think I'm a terrible manager. I had never said those words. I had never like said anything of the sort. However, she took it that way because I was questioning or suggesting other ways that we could maybe do things. And so I think that feeling really misunderstood a lot of the times and having the best intentions for the company and clients, but often feeling like I was fighting internal battles all the time, it was a very draining and probably demotivating, although I stayed motivated, but it was discouraging. Sorry, the word would be
Mm,
discouraging.
yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, how much of a part do you think the cultural essence of someone or their country plays a part in when they go into the workplace? So, for instance, I know from Japanese culture, for instance, that it's more of a collectivist culture as opposed to maybe the UK and US, which are more embracing of the kind of rugged individualism and things like that, and how those two worlds clash. Um, how would you navigate that, do you think, as an employer or just someone who's going through it, someone who's felt different in a cultural society that is more probably collectivist, if I had to take a guess from that example? How does one navigate it? How did you come out the other side in a better place?
So when I was looking at DISC and thinking about countries and cultures, that's a really great question because I was trying to figure out, okay, well, definitely in England, I think steadiness, which is, avoiding conflict, great team players, wanting to kind of like, well, the big avoiding conflict comes to mind,
Hmm.
security and stability and
Yeah.
not rocking the boat. Those are really high in the steady, high S trait. And I think that cultures do have a big part to play. If you look at Americans, they're more communicative. People think they're loud, but they actually are just really good at communicating how they feel about something and more confident in communicating how they feel.
Mm.
Um, so I think that culture does absolutely play a part. And especially when you're living in Southeast Asia or China or any of actually a lot of Asian countries have this hierarchical organizational structure. The boss is the boss, and even, like definitely Japan. I think I heard that if you have to be there before your manager and you can't leave until after they leave the office. So they're, yeah.
Yeah, Japanese work culture does have a reputation, absolutely, for being very interesting. Is probably the best way to talk about it, because someone from another culture will look at that and go, "That's crazy," and then that culture will look back and go, "No, you're crazy," and it's just the whole thing's like everybody's different, man. Let's everyone do what they want to do.
Well, can I also just on that, because Japanese, they're so polite, and if I don't know if you've been, but the people are the most polite in the world, and I feel like the world would be a better place if everybody just operated like
Yeah,
they did in public.
yeah. The British, we're a good fan of manners. Yes, we love to see that sported everywhere. Um, I suppose your individual journey then, and kind of things like inclusion and exclusion. This could be kind of personal life or business life. What are some of the things you've run into when you felt excluded, or when you've actually felt included, and what are those kind of good things that you saw that got implemented that made you feel good? Tell us some stories.
Okay, well, you're gonna go next, but I would say when I lived in Singapore, so I did a few years of my education in Singapore, and I would just take myself off to behind the school building and read every
Mm,
lunch break because I didn't fit in at all. I wasn't Asian enough for the groups that I was around, and then I was very conscious growing up in New Zealand that I had an Asian mother that I would hear abuse towards, so like racial abuse towards,
hmm
where in Christchurch, and that really affected me a lot as well. So I actually grew up totally, I would say almost rejecting my Asian side. I lived in Australia, the States, New Zealand, England, Denmark. Yeah, so I lived in very Western environments, and I was almost ashamed of my Asian heritage until I had the opportunity to move to Singapore, and I was supposed to move there, obviously, because of the lessons that I needed to learn, which was to totally, fully embrace and love the part of me that keeps me looking young for a really long time. I'm just kidding. There are lots of others. I'm not good at math.
I've
Total
enjoyed it
horrible
so far.
stereotype. What about you? Oh, and then we can get into, because in the workplace, I think that just even as a woman showing up and then being pretty alpha in terms of confident with what I want,
Mm,
going after goals, often being the only woman in my teams to
yeah.
be at the level that I was at. I There was an expectation that I wouldn't be challenging, or I would be more demure or subservient to the men around me, and
hmm
that has posed its challenges too.
Yeah, because a lot of it's very subconscious in terms of how people expect you to be, and then you turn out to be another way, and it feels challenging to them, and kind of this is why the kind of subconscious bias training is really important. But I think a lot of people are so adverse to even hearing that term now. Again, we touched on it last episode, but I hate how politicized all of this has become. This DEI should just be a collective effort on how we can all work together and have a much better time at work and all feel included, because talent-wise, diversity is the key to the best and brightest talent on planet Earth.
Mm.
And if you fight against that because you think someone's calling you racist because you want to go to some kind of training, that's your own stuff, unfortunately. But self-awareness isn't always as present in everyone as you'd think. And yeah, my experience is very different, but I share a similar vein in that I think I spent a lot of time not rejecting my culture per se, but pretending that it wasn't there. So
Which one?
the obviously probably the black side. I mean, had to be more British, but again, the two cultures share a lot. I mean, we share a language and things like that, so it's not like it's anything crazy. But it's more like there was no place for me to ever express the Jamaican side of me as much, because I grew up in just school specifically. I was like one of the only one or two mixed kids there, and then it was mostly an all white school. So your personality, your interests, your friend groups all revolve around one side of things and not the other. It's hard to then adopt that when you might bump into a bunch of people from where you're from at some point, and then you're just like, oh dear. And then the jokes that I'm the whitest black guy my white friends know, but in all that, so you're not black enough to be black, you're not white enough to be all that. You're just in the middle on your own. And I think I took that and dived into hyper individualization, very similar to you, as opposed to anything else. And I think a lot of people can relate to that anyway, because even from a mindset point of view, even if you look the same as your peers but you don't feel the same up here, that will lead you to dive into your own path or pull back. And I think recognizing that in your personal life or from a career point of view, for managers, if you can see someone withdrawing or spending a lot of lunches by themselves, there could be a multitude of reasons for that, and not feeling part of something can be a big thing. And just doing our best to navigate that and bring the best out of people. That's what I'm always focused on now, especially now I'm in the kind of employer seat, as it were. It's very strange.
No, I love that point. I had I actually had social anxiety to the point where I was diagnosed with social phobia at university.
Mm.
And I think that it just like everything kind of manifested, but of course it's other stuff that happened in my childhood and everything. But I would be so conscious of looking differently, and and this was back in the day when there weren't a whole lot of, mixed race kids around. I I would say that it was quite a big struggle from that perspective, and I think
Mm.
that that's why really in the workplace I overcompensated from a perspective of wanting to demonstrate how capable and competent and effective I could be. And it was
Mm.
almost like I had something to prove because I never really fit in. And actually what kids all they crave is fitting in at school. They just want to be like everyone else. They want the same lunches as everybody else. They want their parents to show up in the same outfits as everybody else. They don't want to attract attention to being different. So take that and then multiply it by the fact that I was a new kid in school, not in just in new schools, but in new countries at least several times throughout my education. And so, yeah, it was just I think the passion is very deep because it comes from a
Personal
place that I've
experience.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, and obviously we do this podcast because we know we kind of relate to each other's experiences, and that you wouldn't believe the power of those drivers. Especially again, we put things back in a career lens. I could honestly sit here and tell you that probably one of the reasons my business exists, or even thought about doing that, is nothing but revenge. Like purely just a I will prove to you that I can do it. Even if,
Mm.
and a lot of the time, there is no one person. So no one's looked you in the face and going, "You ain't going to be nothing. Your father was nothing. You ain't nothing." It's not. It's not that. It's more of a case of you almost invent the voices of people, what you think they're thinking about you, and it's the kind of that kind of ugly duckling story that I'm going to go and I'm going to come back better. And again, that becomes a big driver for people. So you never know what the form of the chip on someone's shoulder will take. Because as soon as you said chip on the shoulder, I was like, "Yep, that's me. I ain't got a chip. I've got the whole bloody bag of crisps on there." I'll say that, like for a long time, like the overcompensating via work to prove a point to I don't even know who. And
Mm.
then as you grow and evolve, you find out, oh, actually, there's only so long you can be mad for. I'm sure you can extend that period, and different people will have kind of longer that they can have that chip on there. But with some work, you can calm down a tad and figure out how you kind of work in those environments. But I think it was much more of a diversity of mind thing that led me to do that, rather than a diversity of look. But but
Mm.
when you combine them together, you can get these firecracker results, and I think that's why we're in the positions where we are today. But that again is like you might have mentioned before. certain things happen for a reason, and that's why we hopefully are going to be equipped to kind of produce more on the show and start bringing guests on as well to help us push those things forward, because we know a fair bit, but experts are great. But yeah, I'm not sure if you can relate to that.
Well, one thing that came to mind as you were talking, which I've just lost, so hopefully it'll come
Oh, this
back.
is the whole podcast, by the way. There's two ADHD people trying to desperately hold on to what they were about to say, while also remembering to look at the camera and make eye contact. This
So,
is this is the fun challenge. If this is a drinking game, every time James breaks eye contact with the camera, Lord help your liver. That's what I'm going to say.
oh my God. So I'm just trying to think of what you were saying just then. Yeah, it is a struggle that I have. You were
Hmm.
talking about the workplace and carrying a chip on your shoulder. So I don't anymore, but I think I definitely had something to prove to these organizations, and I consistently wanted to be the best person in the role and smash targets, which I did. However, without understanding my personality type, my management didn't really understand how to get the best out of me and how to proactively develop my limitations with me. And
Hmm.
likewise, I just thought I was a difficult person, and or that I was just this way. And it's really through the first step is self-awareness. And when you do have the self-awareness, then you're able to say, okay, so I know that this is the way that I show up every day, and I'm working on these areas, but the person across from me, they are likely of this, they may not be as direct, so I have to modify the way that I approach them and da da da. So it's kind of like a little bit more of not being inauthentic, but seeing how you can collaborate and communicate better with others, which I think is just so important. So I was always in solo roles where I was just a
Hmm.
salesperson, go out, smash targets. I then ran a team, and one of the people in my team, she had all the things that I didn't have. So, ability to get into the detail, really structured,
Hmm.
slower pace, careful. And it was amazing. I would hire her again in a minute. And thankfully, she said that she'd join me too. So I just have to find a business
Coming
that
soon.
I could,
Yeah.
yeah, help her. But I found what I wanted to say. It was around. I don't know about you, but I have set out on missions to really help people. And I have this burning desire to help people because I feel like I wasn't really given the opportunities or the help that I would have liked before. What are your thoughts on
Hmm.
that?
Yeah, and I think creating good out of bad is something that comes with that self awareness and that. But it can also be the start of the mission as well. Like the phrase for my business was, I want to help businesses post more like content creators, because that's what true authenticity is. I wanted to move the business world more into a place of genuine authenticity, not kind of performative authenticity, as it were. So working with a lot of influencers and not really backing up any of the things you talk about, because brand trust is at an all-time low, similar to how people's trust in politics is at an all-time low. The
Hmm.
skepticism could not get any higher in every division of every part of any industry, unless you're so kind of underserved, as it were, that people don't even know your industry exists. So in that sense, building trust, doing something like this, or giving your brand a voice, is become really important on my side of things, and that's how I've tried to kind of push that mission out there, to have a push authenticity on more of a global scale. So you do pick your missions will come out in different ways and things based on your personal experience, and it's good that comes along, but sometimes it takes a while to get to that conclusion, and you have to stay in your career for a while and figure out how you actually want to impose your mark on the world that isn't just vengeance, in my case, to prove people wrong. So without, again, like you said, like without testing your personality, knowing where and why these things happen, you just have no idea. I
Hmm.
think way too many people look at these personality assessments, or even anything HR in general, and they look at it some kind of tick box exercise. oh, we just have to have this department because, or bloody, everyone's talking about ADHD, diversity, everyone's got it these days. It's just that it's just the complete disregard for it will just, that won't lead you anywhere. Eventually, you have to get back to a place where you actually work on yourself and the people within your business. Like, I'm not sure if it's more of a, this might be telling in terms of how I've tried to do it. One of my weaknesses is management and getting into the detail. I'm much more of a leadership type than I am a direct kind of get into the details, management, tick off that task, follow-up type is one of my weaknesses. So I visualized my team and the structure more like a chessboard, and each piece has a different way and place they can move. But if you were trying to play chess without knowing how any of the pieces moved, you couldn't play the game. And I think that's exactly how I'm looking at the whole situation at the moment is, are you analysing your chessboard? Do you know how your team moves? And once you do, you can play the game like a grandmaster. But if you don't, you're going to be like, can I do this? Nope. Can I do that? Nope. Well, now I've lost a bunch of money. And that's the way we need to see it now. But people aren't numbers or chess pieces, by the way. I just want to point out it's an analogy. But yeah, what's your thoughts?
Well, when you're talking about understanding each other's, understanding your team better, it's one so that you can position people 100% in roles where they will succeed, not just for themselves. Not just for the business, but for themselves, because that, success breeds success, and the more successful somebody is, the happier they'll be. All these positive things come out of it. But I think that one of the areas I really care about is how often I feel like, whether you're talking about race or mindset, untrained managers don't actually know how to not only just incorporate but engage with members of their team that aren't like them. So it's, how are you enabling your leaders, or your managers, who hopefully will be good leaders, to understand, nurture relationships, best communicate, because what you may not realize is each of those personality types on DISC, they respond very differently to feedback in different ways. So a high D, you can tell them really directly, they're not going to worry about it because they're focused on the goal, and then you move on, right? They don't have time to worry about you offending them. In fact, they sometimes can lack empathy. So yeah, they're not worried about what you think. The high I's, they fear rejection. So if they feel like you're just telling them the things that are wrong with them and not the things that they're doing right, they will very quickly lose confidence, self-esteem in the role, and then probably perform less. The high S's, now, they'll take it really personally. They won't say anything about it or question or challenge, but they may start looking for another job and not have that open communication with you. And then the high C's, now these guys, I love high C's because they're really logical, analytical thinkers. Yeah, I do, because they're but they take criticism really personally because they work so hard to be perfect. And so when you have these people that are, and now I'm talking about like engineers and, well, anyone in a really technical role, or like accountants as well, but people who are high C's, because not all accountants are high C's, by the way, not all engineers are high C's, but, and sorry for generalizing, but if you're giving them criticism or feedback, you have to say it in such a way that doesn't make them feel defensive. And so it's a really important way to master the way that you show up on a day-to-day at work, but also how to bring people in and really be inclusive as an organization.
Yeah, which ultimately leads better results all around at the end of the day. My favorite phrase is happy people make good shit. So in that sense, keep everyone happy. Like that should be the goal for everyone, because life is too short to be miserable at work. Hence why people, I think, do change jobs far more often than they ever used to. Plus, just economy, that doesn't
Mhm.
help. But it is just really interesting how all of these kind of weave together, and it's very important to make sure we actually care. That's the theme for this episode. Give it a monkeys. It's always a good one. But I think there's probably one thing to wrap up on, I guess, is like, you know, Melissa, especially you, why are you in the best position to help an organization or even individuals with this kind of stuff?
Hmm. Well, I'm accredited with DISC, so in regards to helping organization understand the profiles of the people in their teams, I am most passionate though about not only just taking the information and helping people make sense of their profiles and their reports. It's how do they modify? So how do they look at what they want to achieve and their goals, and how do they modify their behavior and work on some of those limitations that they have so that they're more likely to reach their goals or that 10% better. And I think that we can all, no matter if you're a professional sports person or you're a CEO, there's always room for improvement. And obviously, at that
Mm,
top level, they might be more incremental in terms of the improvements they can make, but still, there's always blind spots that we have. And so, I would say why I'm best positioned. Well, I mean, I don't know if I don't know if anybody's doing this from a diversity mindset perspective. I believe everybody's only doing it from a
mm,
personality profiling and then maybe team cohesion, but how is it truly driving the initiatives of diversity and inclusion within an organization?
mm.
Nobody's doing it.
Yeah, it's a very unique part of your process that is focusing on the mind and the person outside of it, and can actually get into those conversations about race and ethnicity as well, and how that makes them feel in the place, without, and also get into, who are you on the inside as well. Like, having someone that does look different talk to you about these things is vital. Absolutely is vital to actually for any kind of relatability whatsoever. So again, and that's why she's the best at what she does. Cool.
No, well, I was going to say who looks different. If you go to Hawaii or Tahiti, everybody looks like me.
Great places to be then. So happy days, and it's warm. Um,
You get a better tan than I have presently, for sure.
it came out of nature's oven, perfect golden brown. That's how I like to put it. Um, I'm gonna get cancelled in episode 2. This is great. Um, and from my perspective, I like to look at things through, obviously, being running a social media marketing agency, looking at things through the lens of actual communication and how you digitally extend who your workplace really is through social. It's kind of one of many things that social can be used for, but social is completely unutilized by 99% of businesses anyway, especially on their LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is historically just been restricted just because it's a kind of B2B network thing, and it drives me crazy. There,
Mm.
you could get so much higher level talent if you did something unique to show who your company really is. And no, it's not taking pictures of Deborah on her 50th birthday, and that's what you're going to do. It's about how do you create something unique that shows off your team, not just that meet the team. Here's a photo that was reluctantly taken when they didn't expect it, with them looking like this. Like it's not that. It goes beyond that. Like, companies need to embrace original content and consistency over time to overcome all of the skepticism in this new market. It's completely essential for what needs to be done, because then that good talent with the right mindset starts flooding in, and you don't have to look so hard. And then once they're in to manage them, that's when you can start to bring in all of this extra stuff that's super, super important. So, but working on both sides, me and Melissa got it covered. Don't worry. So if you need anything,
Marketing, marketing, sales, and team cohesiveness. Yeah.
it's all part of it, because at the end of the day, we all want to make some money, and that's how businesses work, right? We want to make profit. We want everyone to be happy also, because you can't be somewhere where it makes you feel shit, for lack of a better term. You just
Mm.
can't do it.
Well, so
Um,
here's the other thing that's really great about doing these assessments is sometimes people are in the wrong role. Like, why would you, if you're an introvert, be in a role that makes you have to talk to people all day long and,
Hmm.
drain your energy. It's also a really good opportunity to self-reflect on if you're in the right industry or the right role, and because you only have one life, so how about make the most of it?
Yeah, and does your company have that culture of being able to talk openly about roles and strengths and weaknesses, right? There was
Hmm.
a guy in my company who was absolutely incredible. He was great. He got brought in as a kind of senior social media manager. And then kind of I have a very open culture about kind of goals and everything, whether they be outside of work or inside. And he mentioned that he actually wanted to get into finance and operations. And guess who sucks at it? Me. So I was like, "You, sir, are getting promoted." And then from that point, he was absolutely incredible in operations and finance, and he still works in
Mm.
that now in like a really nice up and coming tech startup. So in that sense, like just having a simple conversation or just having the culture that allows it
Hmm.
is so important, because you could just be unlocking gem after gem after gem. But changing control culture at a corporate level is really difficult and probably requires an entire episode or two by itself. But
Hmm.
individual managers and leaders just do those little things to make sure that you can have those conversations, have them with your team already, lead from the front, and that just opens up them to feel comfortable about it. Because a lot of people still hide if they have to have a side hustle, and some companies don't let people have side hustles. So as soon as you get to a somewhat medium to large business, everyone closes up and tries to fit in the box. Whereas if we opened up just a little bit with communication, things could have a tremendously positive effect.
Oh, that's a whole new episode. I like it. Okay. Thank you.
But yeah, that's got to wrap up this episode, because there's plenty more to talk about. If you are interested, please follow me and Melissa on LinkedIn. We're going to be posting loads of clips from this episode, so you're not going to miss a thing. They also all go up on YouTube, so please do subscribe. And if you need anything else, drop us a message, because we're always here.
Thanks.
Excellent. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.